During World War II, a secret British-American effort known as the ALSOS mission gathered intelligence on the enemy's weapons development. At the end of the war, the ALSOS mission was ordered to execute Operation Epsilon, capture the most important nuclear scientists in Germany, including Otto Hahn, Walter Gerlach, Carl Friedrich von Weizsäcker, and their most valuable target, Werner Heisenberg. The ALSOS mission was created by General Leslie Groves, the director of the Manhattan Project, with the assignment of investigating the enemy's scientific developments, mostly nuclear weapons research. Operation Epsilon had two objectives: find out the truth about the German nuclear program and capture the scientists to keep them away from the French and the Soviets. In addition to the scientists, the ALSOS members found many loads of uranium that were quickly shipped to England, as well as the last experimental nuclear reactor in the village of Heigerloch, in the south of Germany that would soon become part of the French occupation zone. After taking their heavy water and uranium, the reactor was dismantled and blown apart. After nuclear fission was discovered by Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann, and explained by Lise Meitner and Otto Frisch, scientists all over the world realized the consequences. In April 1939, the physical chemist Paul Harteg wrote a memorandum alerting the German War Ministry about the possibility of nuclear explosives. This was just a couple of months before Peierls and Frisch in England calculated the critical mass for a bomb that led to their historical memorandum, which I have discussed in detail in previous videos. Coming from Harteg, his memorandum was taken seriously. He was already the advisor for the Army Weapons Office, or HWA, and the director of the Physical Chemistry Department in Hamburg, a position that he got after Otto Stern, one of the most influential experimentalists of his time and mentor of Otto Frisch, decided to leave Germany. After Harteg's report, the HWA created a special research group to explore the military use of nuclear fission, called the Uranium Club. Contrary to the Manhattan Project, instead of collecting all the scientists in dedicated laboratories for collaboration and sharing of resources, three main groups spread over more than 20 institutions had to allocate the scarce materials and funding. In Hamburg, led by Paul Harteg, another in Berlin, initially led by a less-known physicist called Kurt Dibner, and the third one in Leipzig, led by Werner Heisenberg. After being captured, the scientists were taken to the American base established in Heidelberg to be interrogated by the physicist Samuel Goudsmit. For those familiar with quantum mechanics, Goudsmit is one of the theorists who proposed the existence of the electron's spin in 1925 to explain the result of the famous experiment by Otto Stern and Walter Gerlach in 1922. Gerlach, nominated 30 times to the Nobel Prize in Physics, was now a prisoner, sitting across the interrogation table from Goudsmit. One by one, the scientists were questioned. It was found that the Germans mostly work on reactor physics rather than a bomb, and that their 21 experimental reactors failed to reach criticality, mostly due to the lack of enough uranium and heavy water. Still, their knowledge was too valuable to let them be captured by the Soviets. From Heidelberg, they were moved to France and Belgium, and along the way the group grew. 2 weeks before the Trinity test, on July 3, 1945, the final group of 10 physicists and chemists was taken to a small airfield to board a shiny airplane. You might know some of the names, but I want to give you an idea of the incredible intellectual level of this group. Werner Heisenberg, Nobel laureate in 1932, known by the general public for his uncertainty principle. He was one of the architects of quantum physics and the most notable and respected theoretical physicist in Germany. Otto Hahn, radiochemist who discovered nuclear fission in 1938 and would be awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry a few months later. Walter Gerlach, world famous for his remarkable experiment demonstrating the quantum nature of the electron spin. During the war, he served as a powerful administrator of the nuclear program and managed to get funding and relevant materials for Heisenberg's and Hahn's experiments. Max von Laue, Nobel laureate in 1914 for discovering X-ray diffraction in crystals. He was one of the seniors in the group and was not involved in the Uranium Club. Carl Friedrich von Weizsäcker, Heisenberg's protégé and one of the most brilliant young theorists. Before the war, he discovered, in parallel to Hans Bethe, the CNO cycle, a collection of nuclear fusion reactions that powers the sun. And more notably, he developed the semi-empirical mass formula, the crucial mathematical description of protons and neutrons in atomic nuclei. Paul Harteg, physical chemist, leading reactor design in Hamburg. He spent years in Rutherford's lab in Cambridge, where in 1834, together with Rutherford and Mark Oliphant, produced the first artificial nuclear fusion reaction and discovered tritium. He was also the world expert on heavy water and the first to alert the HWA about the possibility of military applications of a nuclear chain reaction. Karl Wirtz, physicist in charge of reactor construction at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Berlin. Kurt Dibner, one of the organizers of the Uranium Club, but not a famous professor. He developed the reactor design with uranium cubes in heavy water used in their most successful experiments. The group was completed by Erich Bage and Horst Korsching, junior scientists working on reactor design and isotope separation. In the book The Night of the Physicists, there is a passage about the scientists at the Belgian airfield hesitant to board a small airplane with a known destination. Otto Hahn wondered if they would be dropped in the ocean, to which Paul Harteg humorously replied, "If the British really wanted to get rid of us in a crash, they would not use such a brand new aircraft." The flight took them to an English airfield and then a bus to an old countryside house called Farm Hall. The scientists were never charged and always treated as guests. Accommodation was great, food was abundant, and they were no longer interrogated. More importantly, all the rooms were bugged. Hidden microphones captured every conversation, which would be quickly transcribed and translated into English. The transcripts of these conversations were kept secret until 1992. Today they can be found online and also as published books with extra commentary. The now called Farmhall transcripts reveal important information. Many conversations were between no more than 2 or 3 trusted members, which can be used to infer what the scientists knew, but also what they didn't know. The guests spent over a month living peacefully in Farm Hall, mostly talking about physics, politics, worrying about their families, and speculating about their future. They even organized an informal physics seminar. They had access to newspaper, a radio, and even recent scientific publications. The evening of August 6th, the British officer in charge of Farm Hall took Otto Hahn aside and informed him that a 20-kiloton atomic bomb was dropped over Hiroshima. The report from that day indicates that Hahn was completely shattered by the news. He felt personally responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. After being calmed down, Hahn then joined the rest of the group and shared the news. They could not believe that it was possible to separate large amounts of uranium-235, and they even rejected the news as propaganda. Heisenberg claimed that this was probably just a new type of high explosive equivalent to 20,000 tons of TNT, to which von Weizsäcker commented, "It corresponds exactly to the factor 10 to the 4. In the video, Physics of a Nuclear Explosion, I show you how to determine the energy released by the fission of 1 kilogram of uranium-235, which is equivalent to around 10 to the 4 tons of TNT. This is a calculation that Heisenberg and the others of course also did, and this is probably what von Weizsäcker refers to. At 9 p.m., they listened to the BBC radio report about the bomb, which included more technical details. They finally accepted that the bomb was real and began to speculate how it was done, the amount of necessary resources, and about possible isotope separation methods, but quickly moved to justifications for why this could not be done in wartime Germany and even blaming one another. It is important to emphasize that up to this moment, the German scientists, in particular Heisenberg, were convinced that they were ahead of the world on nuclear research, and they planned to use what they had learned as a bargaining chip during the reconstruction of post-war German science. They had written reports outlining the use of their uranium machine, as they called their nuclear reactor, for power generation and even submarine propulsion. They believed that they had invaluable and novel insights and were proud of what they would share with the world after the war. The night of August 6th, they realized not only that they were not ahead, but they had lost the nuclear race. If the Allies had built a bomb, they must also have working nuclear reactors. Now they had nothing to offer. Historians of science and some physicists keep debating some fundamental questions. Why did the Germans fail to make an atomic bomb? Did the nuclear scientists really try to make a bomb for Hitler? How much did Heisenberg understand about bomb physics? Personally, I grew up with the narrative of Heisenberg and his team sabotaged the bomb program for moral reasons. It is the story that von Weizsäcker pushed already at Farmhall and that he repeated over and over again after the war. It is also the thesis of the controversial and highly criticized book Brighter Than a Thousand Suns. Along similar lines, the book Heisenberg's War, The Secret History of the German Bomb was written by a Heisenberg fan. Being a member of the same club, I loved this book when I read it many years ago. However, being interested in the facts, I also read some opposing views. One of the strongest is by Samuel Goudsmit. He was the scientist leading the Alsos mission in Haigerloch and Heidelberg interrogating the scientists. In his book Alsos, he describes the absence of a Nazi bomb due to incompetence. Heisenberg and the others failed to build a bomb because they didn't understand the necessary physics, and Heisenberg could not tell the difference between a bomb and a runaway reactor. However, I find Goudsmit's view blurred by personal emotions. During the war, he asked Heisenberg for help when his parents were sent to a concentration camp. Understandably, Goudsmit's descriptions are filled with condescending comments and anger, but some of his conclusions, like Heisenberg never thought about plutonium, have been proven wrong. One of the most basic questions about bomb design is the estimate of the critical mass. During the war, a range of values between 10 and 100 kilograms of pure U-235 circulated in German reports, but there is no reference to the origin of this range or who calculated it. The correct value is close to 100 kilograms, so it is tempting to believe that the Germans were on the right track. However, Heisenberg usually named a critical mass close to 10 tons. A range of values several orders of magnitude wide is meaningless to conclude anything. Back to August 6th at Farmhall, there is one conversation that is particularly interesting. During a very private conversation between Hahn and Heisenberg, away from the group, Heisenberg estimates that thousands of mass spectrometers could produce 30 kilograms of pure U-35 per year. To which Hahn asked, "Do you think they would need as much as that?" Which is another way to ask, what is the critical mass? Heisenberg's reply is startling. "Quite honestly, I have never worked it out, as I never believed that one could get pure U-235. This statement is disclosing. If there is ever a film about Operation Epsilon, this would be one of those revelations that would shock the viewers. The critical mass is step number 1 in the development of a bomb. It is what led Peierls and Frisch to alert the British government that a nuclear bomb was possible. The fact that Heisenberg never calculated the critical mass confirms again that they did not work on a bomb. Moreover, this confession to Hahn must be taken seriously. It makes him look like a traitor during wartime, putting his life in danger. It is definitely something that Heisenberg would not lie about. After explaining to Hahn that slow neutrons cannot produce a nuclear explosion, and that fast neutrons in pure U-35 are needed, which is all correct and that I explain in detail in the video Nuclear Bomb versus Nuclear Reactor, Hahn asks an important question. How does the bomb explode? Here Heisenberg gives a long and incorrect description of the physics of a nuclear explosion. Let me show you what Heisenberg did and why he got it wrong. As explained in The Physics of a Nuclear Explosion, 1 kilogram of uranium-235 contains around 10 to the 24 nuclei. In a nuclear chain reaction, if each fast neutron fissions a nucleus producing 2 secondary neutrons, the number of fissions grows exponentially, as due to decay, doubling after each generation. Heisenberg realized that the fission of 1 kilogram of uranium-235 requires 81 generations, because 2 to the 81 is approximately 10 to the 24. Then he correctly reasoned that the distance between fissions is given by the fission mean free path, close to 6 centimeters with the values at the time. With this, he calculated the critical radius in a wrong way. He considered the process to be a random walk, where a neutron bounces in random directions within the uranium fissioning nuclei with each collision. The average distance traveled by a random walker given n steps of size lambda is lambda times the square root of n. So Heisenberg multiplied the mean free path by the square root of the number of generations to get a critical radius of 54 centimeters, much higher than the correct value, close to 11 centimeters, and the overly optimistic 2 centimeters of Peirce and Frisch. With this radius, Heisenberg got a critical mass of 13 metric tons. This is where Heisenberg got the 10-ton value for the critical mass. Although he got the critical radius wrong only by a factor 5, the critical mass is proportional to the critical radius to the third power, so he got the critical mass about 120 times larger than the correct one. It took a full week for Heisenberg to realize how wrong his calculation was and the reason for his mistake. On August 14, he gave a lecture to the rest of the group in which he finally uses diffusion theory. Just like Peirce and Frisch, Heisenberg solved the neutron diffusion equation and found a critical radius of 13.5 centimeters, very close to the correct value. He finally and evidently for the first time calculated the correct critical mass. Solving the diffusion equation is an exercise that every physics student has done several times. Thus, solving this equation was a trivial task for Heisenberg and for his audience to follow. But applying diffusion theory to the neutrons in a nuclear chain reaction was clearly a conceptual jump new for everyone. This whole episode confirms again that the Germans did not work on a bomb. Heisenberg's lecture also showed that once he got intensely interested in the problem, he was able to solve it in just a few days. As a side note, in the video about critical mass, I asked if you would like me to show you how to solve the neutron diffusion equation, and the response has been an overwhelming yes, despite the high level of math involved. This deserves its own video and is coming soon. So what did the members of the Uranium Club do during the war? As indicated earlier, mostly reactor research. In February 1942, the Uranium Club presented a complete report to the HWA reviewing their progress. In the past few years, nuclear physicist Manfred Popp has carefully studied the HWA report and argues that many parts have been misrepresented. In a nutshell, Popp presents evidence that the German scientists had little interest in answering basic scientific questions, like cross-sections and other crucial figures that they could have easily measured. They had Walter Botte's cyclotron in Heidelberg and access to cyclotrons in Paris and Copenhagen, so they could have easily separated a few milligrams of U-235 to measure its key properties. Fundamental calculations like Heisenberg's critical mass were never revised. Nobody questioned them. Walter Botte is usually blamed for ruling out graphite as a moderator for the reactors, but nobody repeated his measurements. The issue with this material was that industry-grade graphite contains boron, a great neutron absorber that completely ruins the graphite. But according to Popp, letters between Heisenberg and the Siemens company show that highly pure graphite could have been manufactured in Germany at the time. This is exactly what Leo Szilard and Enrico Fermi did in the US for their Chicago pile. Discarding graphite and choosing heavy water to moderate the reactor led to years of delays. There is also the fact that the different groups never joined forces and resources to achieve the goal. They could have reached criticality by combining their reserves of uranium and heavy water. Regarding a bomb, there is only one report about uranium explosives cited in the HWA report, written by Paul Müller, the only Nazi physicist in the Uranium Club. He was a former student of Schrödinger that had just graduated. Heisenberg gave him the task to determine the uranium enrichment needed for an explosion. Müller found it to be at least 70%, leading to the conclusion that a bomb was out of reach. Additionally, the HWA report makes no mention of fission of U-235 by fast neutrons. All the focus is on slow neutrons, relevant for a reactor, useless for a bomb. In an article published in 2023, Physicists Manfred Popp and Pip de Klerk provide a list of what they call peculiarities of the German uranium project. It is a fascinating read that agrees with my current personal interpretation of Heisenberg's lack of interest in the bomb project. There is a story about Heisenberg visiting Switzerland to give a seminar in late 1942. The ALSO's mission considered kidnapping Heisenberg, but this could lead to a diplomatic crisis, so instead they sent to the seminar a physics-trained baseball player spy named Mo Berg to evaluate whether Heisenberg was working on a bomb. There is a film about this called The Catcher Was a Spy. In this seminar, Heisenberg presented his most recent work, the S-matrix. After the seminar, Berg even went for a walk with Heisenberg to talk more about physics. With a gun on his pocket pointing at Heisenberg at all times, Berg concluded that there was no bomb, and the ALSO's mission let Heisenberg return to Germany. I bring this story because of the topic of the seminar. The S-matrix is an advanced methodology to describe collisions of fundamental particles, and I always found it baffling that Heisenberg developed this remarkable work and published a series of revolutionary papers while working on the uranium project. I cannot imagine any of the Manhattan Project scientists taking time off the bomb project at Los Alamos to think, develop, and publish research on fundamental physics. Heisenberg even took time to organize a small conference on cosmic ray physics, and then edited a book with the contributions, published in 1943, which included 4 of the guests at Farm Hall. During my doctorate, I studied S-matrix theory and cosmic ray physics, and they are very advanced topics, so I got convinced that Heisenberg's priority during the war was not the uranium project, but fundamental physics. Or as Popp and de Klerk put it, Heisenberg's publications during World War II revealed his real scientific interests. Popp and de Klerk include several other peculiarities and their explanation in a phenomenal manner. Their papers are open source, so if you're interested in this topic, I highly recommend them. The last opportunity for a German bomb came in June 1942, when the Minister of Armament, Albert Speer, offered extra funding. Expecting a request for millions of Reichsmark, von Weizsäcker only asked for 40,000. Speer left the meeting convinced that the Uranium Club was just an academic research program. The HWA gave up on the project and passed it to the Research Council, a sign that it was seen as irrelevant for the war effort. The HWA decided to focus on rockets because, contrary to the uranium project, they offer short-term results. The great irony is that the Allies were convinced that the Germans were working on nuclear weapons, and they began the Manhattan Project, officially started in August of 1942, 2 months after the German military had completely given up on a nuclear bomb. This video was sponsored by Brilliant. Do you want to learn physics, math, or computer science using interactive lessons? Then Brilliant is the site for you. At brilliant.org, you will find a great list of courses and learning paths, from basics to advanced topics in physics, math, and computer science, and even dedicated subjects like statistics, data science, and many more. And they keep adding new courses every month. One of their new additions is a course about large language models, or LLMs. Curious to learn how the modern AI tools create text, images, and more? Start your learning path and support the channel by visiting brilliant.org/jk0. The first 30 days are free, and the first 200 of you get 20% off an annual plan. Thank you for supporting the channel, and thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video.